Neptune conjunct Venus in Synastry, soulmate and karmic synastry. I've had a hard time finding videos dedicated to this conjunction on YouTube, so I wanted to add it to give my spin on things. What will I go over in this video? I'll discuss, in order, what it is, who feels what, how to evaluate it in your own synastry and natal chart, and what the potential outcomes are for the relationship. I'll discuss, lastly, why we got into this situation and what the karmic lesson is. If you're not interested in the karmic reading, I'll provide a timestamp so you can skip it. Okay, so firstly, what is it? One person's Neptune is within 10 degrees of another person's Venus when you compare natal charts. I'll discuss how to interpret this more fully in your synastry chart later. It does not occur when the two planets are in different signs based on the whole house system. Look at the energies of these two planets. Venus represents the signs Taurus and Libra, houses 2 and 7. So, it can be about pleasure, sensuality, beauty, women, specifically girlfriends, beautiful women, and it can also be about money, which is the 7th house. It's about monetary exchange, equal give and take. Check your own 7th and 2nd houses to see what energies are playing out there. Neptune is Pisces. It's the last house on the zodiac wheel. As such, Pisces is everything about escaping this Maya. It's when your soul has evolved this planet and is ready to leave this material world and rejoin the spiritual world of oneness. Your 12th house will tell you your attitudes towards Pisces, oneness, sleep, art, etc. So check your own natal chart to see sort of what your own attitudes would be about this energy. And then also your Neptune. On the positive side of this energy, Pisces brings things related to God, spirituality, complete acceptance, fantastic fictional stories, art, rest and sleep, and unconditional love. That's why you've probably heard that Neptune is the higher octave of love. It's how we seek connection with the all-loving. In both the negative and the positive sense, it is seeking release from the Maya, the physical reality. It's the desire to be loved unconditionally by our higher self. It's unobstructed connection to spirit. The negative side of Neptune comes when we are looking for this love and this escape in all the wrong places. It causes more separation and pain. We see Neptune's squares, oppositions, and conjunctions might manifest as addiction, fantasy, fiction, idealism, and rejecting the reality in others, choosing instead to see our own ideal, demanding that others live up to our delusions. So, what is it like when these two energies come together? If Venus and Neptune are both love, then what is the issue? The difference between Neptune and Venus is that Venus is grounded in this reality and this world. It is connection to people and to the physical, while Neptune only has love for what is sacred. It's that one thing that we can't put into words that constantly escapes us. The practical problem is that Neptune feels like a fog. It descends onto your mind, and it causes your thinking to get lost in fantasy. Squares are just as foggy as the conjunction, but the conjunction is closer to what it feels like when you feel unconditional love for another person. It's the closest thing to feeling the love of spirit, but for another. What happens is that the Venus person seeks to reach Neptune's ideal because, as a rule, Venus always wants to please, but Venus is always grounded in the physical realm. Venus needs equal exchange. The 2nd and 7th house, Taurus and Libra, are represented by beauty in the marketplace. The Venus person remains as one whole, a separate person with something to give and something to take. The Neptune person doesn't understand this. They want to merge with Venus. The Neptune person will ignore that part of Venus that is worldly, missing that grounded, worldly enjoyment that the Venus person is seeking. The connection does not feel one-sided to Neptune, but it will manifest as Venus not feeling accepted as they are. despite that being the opposite of what Neptune is supposed to do. It's misdirected energy. The physical and the spiritual cannot merge. The physical and spiritual cannot merge because they are separation, and that is the nature of those things. They will always long for what they can't have. Next, how to evaluate this in your own synastry or natal chart. First, look at the degrees. The closer to 0 degrees this conjunction, the denser the fogginess, and the harder it is to see past the illusion. The further apart this is, the easier it will be to retain your individuality. Next, look at the houses and signs. I suggest for this part to use whole sign sidereal, as my interpretations are only going to be based on that system. If you use equal or any other kind of chart, it's going to be a little bit more mucky and you'll get less clear interpretations, and what I'm saying won't really apply to that. So in your chart, the sign will indicate what spirituality and love means to you, as in, what is the energy that it takes on for you. The house will indicate what areas of life that this will apply. For example, Neptune conjunct Venus in Sagittarius will suggest that two people will feel that love and escape are both an adventure, something to learn, discover, and teach about. In Scorpio, though, it would suggest that intensity is what they believe that love and spirituality are. If it's the 5th house, the area of life will be playfulness, children, etc. If it's the 2nd house, it will involve the physical world, stability, money, etc. Let's discuss who feels what in this conjunction. A close conjunction between Venus and Neptune feels like unconditional love to both people, at least at first. The Venus person will feel like that unconditionality is brought to them from the Neptune person. They will feel special, and they'll feel as though the Neptune person will never see them as nasty or bad. And in a sense, that is true, that Neptune, for a very long time, may not ever see them as negative. For a very long time, it feels really nice, but eventually, Venus wants to be seen for more than just a fantasy, and Neptune does start to judge the negative things about Venus by rejecting them, instead of accepting them for what they are. The Neptune person, to them, it feels like somebody has brought them an endless supply of worldly pleasure, love and appreciation, sensory experiences, and monetary exchange. They may not even understand this. The Neptune person feels foggy around the Venus person. They look at everything they do as perfect. They have a constant desire to tell the Venus person that whatever they're doing is great and it's for a good purpose. Neptune will make excuses for everything the Venus person does. This doesn't have to be an issue, but it can be if the Venus person is overindulging in things, is maybe overindulged in the physical world, or taking advantage of people. The Neptune person can, when speaking to others, either look very delusional, or they can become sort of Venus's diplomatic voice, smoothing over issues, gaining favor from other people. A lot of times this just looks a little bit delusional, and most people won't come around, but there can be a purpose to it. It really just depends on the overall energies in the chart. For Neptune, there will be this slight feeling at some point that some of the things that Venus is doing aren't right or okay. But they'll brush it off because they can only see the good in Venus. They don't want to see the reality. They will never want to see the reality that in this world, we are all selfish because we need to be. We don't merge. We're not one person. We're two people. Neptune wants to merge, but in doing so, they prevent it because they reject what Venus is and ask Venus to become what Neptune is. All of this ties into the eventual outcome of this relationship. It can go a few different ways, and I wouldn't say that the relationship is lost with this conjunction or anything like that, but because Because it's so intense and so foggy, and the expectations are so high, people who have already learned this lesson won't get into this relationship. They'll keep it as a friendship. And most of these relationships, they either don't start, or if they do start, they become depressing, and after a really long time, they can end. But that doesn't have to be the case. The beginning of this relationship feels mystical and beautiful. Both people will feel completely in love. Depending on how close the conjunction is, say if it's 0 degrees, 1 degree, 2 degrees, it's almost an immediate feeling of being drugged and being happy about it. If it's, say, up to 10 degrees, what you'll get is two people that come together and sort of discuss their ideals and maybe kind of forget that the other person isn't what they're looking for, but it feels good, and they make excuses, and maybe a hot topic a lot of times in that relationship would be, you're not sort of living up to what I want. That could be one of the major issues. With a wider degree, say Neptune and Venus are just occupying the same house. When this relationship does eventually go sideways due to their differences, it's because of the impossible task of merging two things that do not belong together. Those two things, at their very basis, are separation and oneness. Venus and Neptune both try to change the other person subtly. The Neptune person doesn't realize that they are rejecting things about Venus that are very important to Venus. Venus can do everything in their power to make Neptune's illusions a reality, and, in a way, reject their own nature to please Neptune, because they feel so special and good. So they'll buy into the illusion themselves. So that fogginess that Neptune feels around Venus can sort of transfer onto Venus psychologically. Venus will eventually fail to accomplish this because Venus works in the physical plane. Venus is not a spiritual thing, it's a physical thing, it's daily human life. Venus will eventually feel two things. One, that they're not good enough, and two, that life will be more practical elsewhere. When this relationship ends, often it can be the Venus person that gets fed up with not meeting the ideal and leaving. For Neptune, years after the relationship ends, Neptune will still wish good for Venus and will start to remember the bad things. They will usually allow the fog to disperse and start to see at least some of the reality of the bad things. But secretly, they will wish to have their fantasy back. Neptune will actually blame Venus for not being perfect. This effect is much worse when we have lots of Pisces, 12th house energies that are coming together, and squares with Neptune in other places. You can also see Neptune, the Lord of Neptune's house, going into the other person's second house, or even if it's not a conjunction, or if your Neptune is in my 7th house or your Venus is in my 12th house. So, overall, how did we get into this situation, and what can we do about it? What actually led us here is the desire for unconditional love. We feel this deep longing, and it tells us that there's a separation from our higher self, and that there's a call toward that unity within us. The illusion and the fantasy will do everything to keep you separated, but the way out is actually inward. From Venus, we must first learn that we are separate from others in this world, and to love ourselves as that separate being. The Neptune person missed this evolutionary step, while at the same time showing Venus where their next step is on their journey. What is the karmic lesson here? The karmic lesson is that the final evolution of your soul has either started, or you're in the midst of, or you're ready to complete that. Your own karma is situational, so you can see it in your own natal chart. I highly suggest for this part to use sidereal whole signs and check houses 2, 7, and 12. Check planetary placements for Neptune and Venus, their houses, and their signs. Anything with Rahu and Ketu in the 1st and 12th houses will be significant. That will indicate karmic journeys. And these are actually things that you don't really have to worry too much about if you're doing the work. You don't have to worry about like fully interpreting your chart, but if you have a lot of 12th house stuff in sidereal, a lot of Neptune conjunctions, if you have a lot of like planets in Pisces, that'll indicate that this is part of your journey. So finally, what is the karma here? And how do we get ourselves out of this issue or out of this longing and away from expecting other people to bring us the love of God? Finding yourself in a relationship like this means that your soul is longing for oneness. It could be that this is one of your last lifetimes on Earth. Go back within and connect with your higher self. The goal is to love yourself unconditionally, as you would have with your Venus partner. Remember the feeling of unconditional love and notice that it comes from deep within you. You are your own ideal person. Venus really could have never lived up because it may have appeared that your own soul was sort of peering back out of their eyes at you. That's not true until we merge back with the oneness. For now, the only part of the all that you have is within yourself. And until you learn to love that part of yourself and truly, truly, truly love it as if it were a sacred thing and become that, you're not going to experience unconditional love with other people the way that you want, or the way that this type of relationship makes you long for it. So just remember that you are your own ideal person. For the time being, you're your own soulmate. Meditate on that feeling of unconditional love within yourself. And remember that you are already one with the universe. The way that your higher self sees it, you're already whole and perfect. Worthiness affirmations, mirror gazing, and third eye meditations may be of use. Lastly, I'll suggest Wayne Dyer's meditation, The Gap, which you can find on YouTube. Thank you for your time and good luck on your journey.